During a military operation in a war zone, a soldier was killed in an explosion. His canine partner Max was with him. When the rescue team arrived, they expected the dog to run. Instead, Max refused to leave his partner's body. For 48 hours, the dog guarded the fallen soldier, protecting him even in death. But what happened next proved that this dog's loyalty was stronger than anything the military had ever witnessed. Stay with us because this story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The sun hadn't fully risen over the military base when the alarm sounded. Not the kind of alarm that meant danger, the kind that meant preparation. Soldiers moved with practiced precision across the dusty compound, checking weapons, securing gear, running through protocols they'd memorized 1,000 times. But for one soldier, there was only one preparation that mattered. His name was Captain James Mitchell, 34 years old, 12 years of service, 3 tours in combat zones. He'd seen things that would haunt most people for the rest of their lives. But this morning, like every morning before a mission, he walked to the canine unit with a specific purpose. The kennel was quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the base. Rows of cages held some of the most trained military dogs in the world: German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Labrador Retrievers. Each one worth more than gold in the field. Each one capable of detecting explosives, tracking enemies, and saving lives with a single alert. But James didn't stop at any of those kennels. He walked straight to the last one, where a lean, muscular German Shepherd stood waiting. The dog's name was Max, and Max had been waiting for this moment since the moment James left him yesterday. The dog's ears perked up instantly. His tail didn't wag. Max was too disciplined for that. But his entire body tensed with recognition and anticipation. He knew what was coming. He'd done this hundreds of times, but every single time it felt like the first time. "Hey buddy," James whispered, unlocking the kennel. "You ready for today?" Max stepped out smoothly, moving with the grace of a warrior. His coat was jet black, his eyes sharp and intelligent. He was 7 years old, which made him middle-aged for a military dog, but his body was still lean, his reflexes still sharp, his mind still sharper. He'd been trained since he was a puppy to do one thing: protect James Mitchell and complete the mission. James knelt down, and Max pressed his head against James's chest. It was a moment of connection that lasted only a few seconds, but it meant everything. This wasn't just a handler and his dog. This was a soldier and his battle partner. This was a man and the only being on Earth who truly understood him. "We're going to do this right," James said, running his hand along Max's back. "Just like we always do. You alert, I listen. You protect, I protect. We watch each other's backs, and we both come home." Max's ears twitched at the sound of James's voice. The dog didn't understand words the way humans did, but he understood tone. He understood emotion. He understood that James was nervous. And if James was nervous, Max would be twice as alert, twice as protective, twice as ready. The two of them had been together for 5 years. 5 years of training, of missions, of danger, of survival. They'd been through ambushes together. They'd been through IED searches together. They'd been through moments where a single mistake would have meant death for both of them. And every single time, they'd come out the other side because they trusted each other completely. James stood up, and Max moved into position beside him, exactly where he was supposed to be. They walked together toward the briefing room, the soldier and his dog moving as one unit. Other soldiers watched them pass. Everyone knew who they were. Everyone knew that Captain Mitchell and Max had the highest success rate of any handler dog team on the base. Everyone knew that if you wanted a mission completed, you sent Mitchell and Max. But what most people didn't know was that it wasn't just training that made them so effective. It wasn't just skill or discipline or years of experience. It was love. It was the kind of bond that couldn't be taught or manufactured or replicated. It was something that existed between two beings who had faced death together and chosen to trust each other completely. The briefing room was packed with soldiers, 20 of them, maybe more. Each one was trained, disciplined, ready for combat. But the energy in the room was different today. There was tension. There was anticipation. There was the kind of electricity that only came before a dangerous mission. Colonel Harrison stood at the front of the room, a map spread out on the table in front of him. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had seen too much. He'd been in the military for 30 years. He'd seen wars change, tactics evolve, technology advance. But one thing had never changed: the danger. The constant, ever-present danger. "Gentlemen," Colonel Harrison began, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Today's mission is straightforward. We have intelligence that a weapons cache has been hidden in an abandoned warehouse in the eastern sector. Our job is to locate it, secure it, and neutralize any threats. We go in at 0800 hours. We come out with the cache, no exceptions." He pointed to the map showing the location of the warehouse. It was in a volatile area, an area where insurgents were known to operate, an area where explosives were common, an area where people died. "Captain Mitchell," Colonel Harrison said, his eyes finding James in the crowd. "You'll lead the team. Max will do the initial sweep. If he alerts, we proceed with caution. If he doesn't alert, we move in and secure the area. Questions?" James stood up, Max immediately standing beside him. "No questions, sir. We'll get it done." Colonel Harrison nodded. He'd heard those words from James 100 times, and 100 times James had delivered. "Good. You have 2 hours to prepare. Dismissed." The soldiers filed out of the briefing room, moving with purpose. James and Max stayed behind for a moment. James was running through the mission in his head, visualizing every step, every potential danger, every contingency. Max was watching James, reading his body language, preparing himself mentally for what was coming. "This one feels different," James whispered to Max, though no one was around to hear. "I don't know why, but something feels different today." Max's ears twitched. The dog didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. James was worried, and if James was worried, Max would be extra careful, extra alert, extra protective. The next 2 hours were a blur of preparation. James and Max went through their pre-mission routine, the same routine they'd done hundreds of times. James checked his weapon, his ammunition, his body armor. He checked his communication equipment, his medical kit, his emergency supplies. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake could mean death. Max went through his own preparation. He was given water to drink, food to eat, a few minutes to rest. His handler, a young soldier named Private Chen, made sure the dog was in peak condition. Max's paws were checked for injuries. His coat was inspected for any signs of illness. His mental state was assessed. Everything had to be perfect for Max, too. By the time they were ready to move out, James and Max were locked in. They were in the zone. They were ready for anything. The convoy of military vehicles pulled out of the base at 0800 hours exactly. James sat in the lead vehicle with Max, his hand resting on the dog's neck. Through the window, he could see the desert stretching out in every direction. Sand, rocks, the occasional building. It looked peaceful. It looked calm. But James knew better. He knew that danger could come from anywhere, at any time, without warning. The drive took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of silence, of tension, of preparation. Max sat calmly, his eyes watching the landscape, his nose working, processing scents that James couldn't even imagine. The dog was in full work mode now. He wasn't a pet anymore. He was a soldier. He was a weapon. He was a protector. When the convoy finally stopped, they were a quarter mile from the warehouse. The soldiers got out of the vehicles, weapons ready, eyes scanning the area. James unclipped Max's leash, and the dog immediately moved into search mode. His nose was down, his body low, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Go ahead, boy," James whispered. "Find it." Max moved forward, his senses heightened to maximum. He was looking for explosives, for weapons, for anything that didn't belong. His training had taught him to recognize the scent of military-grade explosives, and his nose was so sensitive that he could detect them from hundreds of yards away. The team followed behind Max, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. They moved slowly, carefully, methodically. Every step could be their last. Every corner could hide an enemy. Every shadow could conceal danger. Max led them to the warehouse without incident. The dog circled the building once, twice, 3 times. His nose was working overtime, processing every scent, every molecule in the air. And then, suddenly, he stopped. His body went rigid. His ears perked up. He'd found something. James watched Max carefully. The dog's alert was unmistakable. There were explosives nearby. Lots of them. The kind that could level a building. The kind that could kill everyone in a 100-yard radius. "Explosives," James called back to the team. "Max is alerting. Proceed with extreme caution." The soldiers moved forward, now even more careful than before. They knew that Max had found what they were looking for, but they also knew that finding it and securing it were two very different things. As the team moved closer to the warehouse, James kept his hand on Max's neck. It was a gesture of connection, of communication, of trust. Max was his anchor in this chaos. Max was the one thing he could count on completely, and Max knew it. The dog moved forward, leading James deeper into the warehouse. The building was dark, dusty, filled with shadows. It smelled of rust and decay and something else, something chemical, something dangerous. Max's alert intensified. The explosives were close, very close. James could feel his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment where everything could go wrong. This was the moment where a single mistake could mean death. But then, Max did something unexpected. The dog stopped and looked back at James. It was a moment of connection, a moment of understanding. Max was saying something without words. Max was saying, "I'm here. I've got this. Trust me." And James did trust him. Completely. Absolutely. Without reservation. "I've got you, buddy," James whispered. "Let's finish this." The two of them moved forward together, soldier and dog, handler and partner, man and beast. They were a unit. They were unstoppable. They were ready for anything. But what they didn't know was that this moment, this mission, this day, would be the last time they would ever be together in the field. What they didn't know was that in just a few hours, everything would change forever. What they didn't know was that the bond between them, the trust they'd built over 5 years, would be tested in ways they could never have imagined. The team found the weapons cache in the basement of the warehouse. Crates of ammunition, military-grade explosives, weapons of all kinds. It was exactly what intelligence had said would be there. It was exactly what they'd come to find. But as they were securing the area, as they were preparing to extract the cache, something went wrong. One of the soldiers, a young private named Rodriguez, stepped on a pressure plate, an IED, an improvised explosive device, the kind that insurgents used to kill American soldiers. The explosion was instantaneous. It was violent. It was catastrophic. The blast threw soldiers across the room like rag dolls. Dust and smoke filled the air. The sound was deafening, a roar that seemed to come from the depths of hell itself. When the dust settled, when the smoke cleared, when the ringing in everyone's ears finally stopped, the reality of what had happened became clear. Private Rodriguez was dead, killed instantly by the blast. 2 other soldiers were injured, their bodies broken and bleeding, and Captain James Mitchell was lying on the ground, unconscious, his body covered in dust and blood. Max was standing over James, his body shielding his handler from the falling debris. The dog was bleeding from multiple wounds. Shrapnel had torn into his side, his leg, his shoulder. But Max didn't care about his own injuries. Max only cared about one thing: James. The dog let out a howl, a sound of pain and anguish and desperation. It was a sound that would haunt everyone who heard it for the rest of their lives. It was the sound of a soldier losing his battle partner. It was the sound of a dog losing his handler. It was the sound of a bond being shattered. The rescue team rushed in, pulling the injured soldiers out of the warehouse. They grabbed James, loading him onto a stretcher. They grabbed the other injured soldiers. They grabbed the weapons cache, but they didn't grab Max. "We have to go," someone shouted. "The building is collapsing." The soldiers ran, carrying their wounded, carrying their dead, carrying the cache they'd come to retrieve. But Max didn't run. Max stayed with James, his body pressed against his handlers, his eyes never leaving James's face. "We have to leave the dog," someone shouted. "He's slowing us down." But Max wouldn't leave. Max refused to abandon his handler. Max had been trained to protect James, and he would protect James even if it meant dying in the process. One of the soldiers, a sergeant named Williams, grabbed Max's collar and tried to pull him away, but the dog fought back, snarling, snapping, refusing to be separated from James. The bond between them was stronger than any command, stronger than any training, stronger than survival instinct itself. In the end, they had to sedate Max. They had to inject him with a tranquilizer to get him away from James. And as the dog's eyes closed, as consciousness slipped away, Max's last thought was of his handler. Max's last feeling was of loss. James Mitchell woke up in a hospital bed in Germany. His body was wrapped in bandages. His left arm was in a cast. His right leg was in traction. He'd been in a medically induced coma for 3 days. The doctors had done everything they could to save his life, and they'd succeeded, but just barely. The first thing James asked when he woke up was about Max. "Where's my dog?" he croaked, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had been down his throat. "Where's Max?" The nurse, a woman named Sarah, looked uncomfortable. "Captain Mitchell, you need to rest. You've been through a lot." "I don't care," James said, his voice getting stronger. "Where's Max? Is he okay? Is he alive?" Sarah hesitated. She'd been briefed on the situation. She knew what had happened. She knew that the dog had been sedated and evacuated with the rest of the team. She knew that Max was alive. But she also knew something else, something that would break James's heart. "Max is alive," Sarah said carefully, "but he's been transferred to a military veterinary hospital. He was injured in the explosion. He's recovering, but what?" James demanded, his eyes suddenly alert, suddenly focused. "What happened to him?" "He has shrapnel wounds," Sarah said. "He's lost a lot of blood. The vets are doing everything they can, but he's in critical condition." James felt something inside him break. Max was hurt. Max was suffering, and James couldn't do anything about it. He was stuck in this hospital bed, wrapped in bandages, unable to move, unable to help his partner. "I need to see him," James said. "I need to go to him." "Captain Mitchell, you're not well enough to—" "I don't care," James interrupted. "I need to see my dog. That's an order." Sarah knew better than to argue with a captain, especially one who'd just woken up from a coma. She left the room to talk to the doctors. 2 days later, James was wheeled into the military veterinary hospital. He was still in a wheelchair, still in pain, still recovering from his injuries. But he had to see Max. He had to know that his partner was going to be okay. The veterinarian, a man named Dr. Patterson, met James at the entrance. He was a tall man with kind eyes, but those eyes were also sad. He knew what James was about to see, and he knew it would be difficult. "Captain Mitchell," Dr. Patterson said, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Patterson. I've been treating Max since he arrived." James shook his hand, but his eyes were searching the room. "Where is he? Where's Max?" "Follow me," Dr. Patterson said. They wheeled James through the hospital, past cages holding other injured military dogs. Some were recovering well, some were not. Finally, they stopped at a cage in the back of the hospital. Max was lying on a bed, his body covered in bandages. His left side was heavily wrapped where shrapnel had torn into his flesh. His right leg was in a cast. His breathing was shallow, his eyes closed. He looked small, vulnerable, broken. James felt tears streaming down his face. He'd seen combat. He'd seen death. He'd seen things that would make most people's nightmares seem tame. But seeing Max like this, seeing his partner hurt and suffering, was almost too much to bear. "How bad is it?" James asked, his voice barely a whisper. "He's stable," Dr. Patterson said. "The shrapnel wounds are healing well. The broken leg should mend completely. But what?" James demanded. "But he's lost the will to fight," Dr. Patterson said. "Physically, he's recovering, but mentally, emotionally, he's given up. He won't eat, he won't drink, he just lies there waiting for something or someone." James understood immediately. Max was waiting for him. Max was waiting for his handler, his partner, his reason for living. Can I touch him?" James asked. Dr. Patterson nodded and wheeled James closer to the cage. James reached out his good arm and placed his hand on Max's head. The dog's eyes opened immediately. For a moment, there was nothing, just the blank stare of a dog who'd lost everything. But then recognition flickered in those eyes. Recognition and relief and love. Max's tail thumped once against the bed. Just once, but it was enough. It was everything. "I'm here, buddy, James. I'm here. You're going to be okay. We're both going to be okay." Max's eyes closed again, but this time it was different. This time, the dog was at peace. This time, the dog knew that his handler was alive. This time, the dog knew that they would be together again. Over the next 2 weeks, both James and Max recovered. James's wounds healed. His arm came out of the cast. His leg came out of traction. He started physical therapy, learning to walk again, learning to function again. And every single day, he visited Max in the veterinary hospital. And every single day, Max got a little bit better. The dog started eating again. The dog started drinking again. The dog started showing interest in the world around him. Because James was there. Because his handler was alive. Because they were together again. But then came the day that James had been dreading. The day when the doctors told him he was well enough to go home. The day when he had to leave Max behind. "I'm not leaving without him," James said. "Max comes with me or I don't go." "Captain Mitchell," Dr. Patterson said, "Max is a military dog. He belongs to the military. He'll be reassigned to another handler." "No," James said. "No, he won't. Max is my partner. We've served together for 5 years. We've been through hell together. I'm not abandoning him." "I understand your feelings," Dr. Patterson said, "but Max is military property. The decision isn't up to you." James felt rage building inside him, rage and desperation and despair. He'd survived the explosion. Max had survived the explosion. But now they were going to be separated anyway. Now they were going to be torn apart by bureaucracy and military regulations. He looked at Max through the cage, and the dog looked back at him. Max knew something was wrong. Max could sense James's distress. And the dog's tail, which had been wagging moments before, went still. "This isn't over," James said to Dr. Patterson. "Max saved my life. I'm going to save his." James was discharged from the hospital a week later. He was given a medical discharge from the military. His injuries were too severe for him to continue active duty. He was going home to a small town in Colorado, to a house he hadn't seen in 3 years, to a life he could barely remember. But before he left Germany, he did something that would change everything. He filed a petition with the military to adopt Max. He argued that Max was too traumatized to serve another handler. He argued that the bond between them was too strong to break. He argued that Max deserved to spend his retirement years with the man who'd saved his life just as much as Max had saved his. The petition went through channels. It went to commanders, to generals, to bureaucrats who'd never met James or Max, but who had the power to decide their fate. And for weeks, there was silence. Nothing but silence and uncertainty. James went home to Colorado. He moved into his house, surrounded by memories of a life he used to live. He started physical therapy, learning to walk without pain, learning to function in a world that no longer made sense. And every single day, he thought about Max. Every single day, he wondered if his partner was okay. Every single day, he wondered if they would ever see each other again. And then, one day, he got a phone call. "Captain Mitchell?" a voice said on the other end. "This is Colonel Harrison. I'm calling to inform you that your petition has been approved. Max has been medically retired from service. He's being shipped to you in Colorado. He should arrive within the week." James felt something inside him break open. Not in a bad way, in the best way possible. Max was coming home. Max was coming to him. They were going to be together again. The day Max arrived, James was waiting at the airport. He was standing on crutches, his body still recovering, but his spirit soaring. He'd waited for this moment for months. He'd fought for this moment. And now it was finally here. The cargo door of the plane opened and a handler emerged, leading a dog on a leash. The dog was lean, muscular, with a black coat and intelligent eyes. It was Max. The moment Max saw James, something changed in the dog's body. His ears perked up. His tail started wagging. He pulled on the leash, trying to get closer to his handler. The handler, a young soldier, let the dog go, and Max ran toward James as fast as his healing leg would allow. James dropped one of his crutches and caught Max as the dog jumped up, his paws on James's shoulders, his tongue licking his handler's face. They were together again. After months of separation, after months of uncertainty, they were finally together again. James held Max close, tears streaming down his face. The dog was trembling, whimpering, expressing emotions that dogs weren't supposed to be able to feel. But Max felt them. Max felt everything, because Max loved James with a love that transcended species, that transcended training, that transcended everything. "I've got you, buddy," James whispered into Max's ear. "I've got you. We're never going to be separated again. I promise." Max's tail wagged harder, and for the first time since the explosion, both man and dog felt like they could breathe again. They were home. They were together, and they were never going to let each other go. But what James didn't know, what nobody knew, was that there was another part to this story. A part that had been hidden, buried, kept secret by military officials who didn't want the truth to come out. The explosion in the warehouse hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been an IED placed by insurgents. It had been something else entirely, something darker, something that would shake the military to its core. 3 months after James and Max were reunited in Colorado, James received a visitor. The visitor was a military investigator named Agent Sarah Chen. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She'd been investigating the warehouse explosion for months, and she'd finally uncovered the truth. "Captain Mitchell," Agent Chen said, sitting across from James in his living room. Max was lying at James's feet, his head resting on his handler's leg. "I need to talk to you about what really happened in that warehouse." James felt his stomach tighten. He'd been trying to move past the explosion, trying to focus on his recovery, trying to rebuild his life with Max. But he knew that something didn't add up. He knew that the official story didn't make sense. "What do you mean?" James asked. "It was an IED. That's what they told me." "That's what they told everyone," Agent Chen said, "but it wasn't an IED. We found evidence at the scene, evidence that was hidden, evidence that someone didn't want found." "What kind of evidence?" James asked, his voice getting harder. "Explosives," Agent Chen said. "Military-grade explosives, the kind that the military uses, the kind that wouldn't be placed by insurgents, the kind that would be placed by someone inside the military." James felt the world tilt beneath him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that someone in your unit planted that explosive," Agent Chen said. "Someone wanted that weapons cache destroyed. Someone wanted Private Rodriguez dead, and someone wanted you dead too." Agent Chen laid out the evidence. She showed James documents, photographs, testimony from other soldiers. It all pointed to the same conclusion. Someone in the military had sabotaged the mission. Someone had planted the explosive. Someone had wanted the mission to fail. And as Agent Chen explained the details, James began to understand why. The weapons cache wasn't just any weapons cache. It was a cache that had been stolen from a military armory. A cache that had been sold on the black market. A cache that had been part of a corruption scheme that reached all the way to the top of the military command structure. The mission to recover the cache wasn't about recovering stolen weapons. It was about destroying evidence. It was about eliminating witnesses. It was about covering up a crime that went all the way to the top. And James and Max had been sent into the middle of it, not knowing what they were walking into. They'd been sent to recover the cache, but the people who'd sent them had actually wanted them dead. Private Rodriguez was killed because he was going to talk, Agent Chen explained. He'd discovered the corruption scheme. He was going to expose it. So someone decided to silence him. And they decided to silence you too, because you were the only one who could have survived that explosion. You and your dog. "But Max and I did survive," James said. "We survived, and now you're here, which means the truth is coming out." "The truth is coming out," Agent Chen confirmed, "but it's not going to be easy. There are powerful people who don't want this truth to come out. Powerful people in the military, powerful people in government, but we're going to expose them, and we need your help." James looked down at Max, who was watching him with those intelligent eyes. The dog knew something was wrong. The dog could sense James's distress, and Max pressed his head against James's leg, offering comfort in the only way he knew how. "I'll help," James said. "Whatever you need, I'll help." Over the next several months, James worked with Agent Chen and the military investigators. He gave testimony about the mission. He described what he'd seen, what he'd heard, what he'd felt. He talked about the explosion, about the chaos, about the moment when everything changed. And his testimony, combined with the evidence that Agent Chen had gathered, began to paint a picture of corruption that reached into the highest levels of the military. Officers were arrested. Generals were questioned. The scandal grew bigger and bigger, threatening to tear apart the entire military structure. But through it all, Max was there. Max was James's anchor, his comfort, his reason to keep going. Because testifying meant reliving the trauma. It meant going back to that warehouse, that explosion, that moment when everything changed. And Max was there to help James through it. The dog would lie at James's feet during the long interviews. The dog would rest his head on James's lap during the difficult moments. The dog would simply be present, offering his unconditional love and support, reminding James that he wasn't alone. And slowly, James began to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. Not just from the explosion, but from the trauma of the conspiracy, the betrayal, the realization that the people he'd trusted had tried to kill him. The investigation concluded with a military court-martial. Officers were tried for corruption, for conspiracy, for attempted murder. Some were convicted, some were acquitted. Some took plea deals and testified against their superiors. And through it all, James sat in the courtroom, with Max at his side. The military had made an exception, allowing Max to be present during the proceedings. Because everyone understood that Max wasn't just a dog. Max was a soldier. Max was a witness. Max was a hero. When the final verdict came down, when the last officer was convicted, when the last sentence was handed down, James felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Justice had been served. The truth had come out, and he and Max had played a role in making that happen. 6 months later, James and Max were invited to a military ceremony. A ceremony where they would be recognized for their service, for their bravery, for their role in exposing the corruption. James wore his dress uniform, the uniform he hadn't worn since his medical discharge. Max wore a special harness, decorated with medals and ribbons. They stood together in front of a crowd of military personnel, government officials, and media. A general approached them, and James stood at attention. Max stood beside him, calm and dignified. "Captain James Mitchell and military dog Max," the general announced, "you are hereby awarded the Medal of Valor for your exceptional service, your unwavering courage, and your role in exposing corruption within the military. You have demonstrated that the bond between a soldier and his dog is stronger than any conspiracy, any betrayal, any obstacle. You are heroes." As the general pinned the medal on James's chest, the crowd erupted in applause. James looked down at Max, and the dog looked back at him. And in that moment, they both understood something fundamental. They had survived not just the explosion, but the conspiracy that followed. They had survived because they had each other. They had survived because their bond was unbreakable. After the court-martial concluded, James and Max settled into civilian life. James bought a small ranch outside of Denver, Colorado. It had open fields, fresh air, and plenty of space for Max to run. It was the kind of place where a man and his dog could heal, could recover, could rebuild their lives. James started a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping military dogs transition to civilian life. He called it Soldiers' Companions, and its mission was to ensure that every military dog who'd served their country was given a home, given love, given the kind of care they deserved. Max became the face of the organization. The dog appeared in promotional videos, at fundraising events, at speaking engagements where James talked about the bond between soldiers and their dogs. And everywhere they went, People were moved by their story. People understood that what James and Max had was special. People understood that their bond transcended the normal relationship between a man and his pet. But James didn't stop there. He used his experience, his training, his knowledge of military operations to help rescue other military dogs from around the world. Dogs who'd been left behind when their units were withdrawn. Dogs who'd been abandoned when their handlers were injured or killed. Dogs who'd been forgotten by the military system that had trained them. James would travel to foreign countries, work with local authorities, negotiate with military officials, and bring these dogs home. And Max would go with him on every mission. Because Max understood what these dogs had been through. Max understood the trauma, the loss, the feeling of abandonment. And Max's presence helped these dogs understand that they weren't alone, that they would be okay, that they would find homes and families and love. One of the dogs James rescued was a Belgian Malinois named Shadow. Shadow had been left behind in Afghanistan when his handler was killed in combat. The dog had spent 3 years living on the streets, surviving on scraps, traumatized and broken. When James found him, Shadow was barely recognizable as a military dog. He was thin, scarred, feral. But Max did something remarkable. Max approached Shadow slowly, carefully, without aggression. And Max let Shadow smell him, let Shadow understand that he was safe. And slowly, Shadow began to trust. Slowly, Shadow began to heal. And eventually, Shadow was adopted by a family in Texas, where he lived out his days in peace and comfort. This became the pattern. James and Max would find a traumatized military dog. Max would help that dog understand that healing was possible, and James would find that dog a home. Over 5 years, James and Max rescued more than 50 military dogs. 50 dogs who would have died on the streets, who would have been euthanized, who would have been forgotten. 50 dogs who now had homes, had families, had love. A filmmaker named Michael Rodriguez heard about James and Max's story. He was fascinated by the bond between them, by the way they'd survived the explosion, by the way they'd exposed the corruption, by the way they dedicated their lives to helping other military dogs. Michael approached James with a proposal. Make a documentary about their story. Tell the world about what had happened in that warehouse. Tell the world about the conspiracy. Tell the world about the bond between a soldier and his dog. At first, James was hesitant. He'd spent years trying to move past the trauma, trying to focus on the present rather than the past. But then he realized something. Telling their story could help other soldiers and their dogs. Telling their story could raise awareness about the plight of military dogs. Telling their story could inspire people to help. So James agreed. And over the next year, Michael followed James and Max as they went about their daily lives. He filmed them rescuing dogs. He filmed them speaking at events. He filmed them at home, just being together, just being a man and his dog. And the documentary that resulted was powerful. It was moving. It was a story about love, about loyalty, about the unbreakable bond between two beings who'd faced death together and chosen to trust each other completely. The documentary premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. It won awards. It was picked up by major streaming services. And suddenly, the story of James and Max was known around the world. The documentary changed everything. Suddenly, people were interested in military dogs. Suddenly, people were interested in the plight of dogs who'd been left behind. Suddenly, people were interested in supporting organizations like Soldiers' Companions. Donations poured in. Volunteers stepped forward. Other organizations dedicated to helping military dogs were founded, inspired by James and Max's story. Military policy changed. The military began to prioritize finding homes for retired military dogs rather than euthanizing them. The military began to recognize that these dogs had served their country and deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. And it all started because James refused to leave Max behind in that warehouse. It all started because a soldier and his dog refused to be separated. It all started because their bond was stronger than any obstacle, any conspiracy, any force that tried to tear them apart. 10 years after the explosion in that warehouse, James and Max were older. James had gray in his hair. Max's muzzle was white. They were both slowing down, both feeling the effects of age and the trauma they'd endured. But they were still together, still inseparable, still the best of partners. James had written a book about his experiences. The book had become a bestseller. He'd been invited to speak at universities, at military academies, at corporate events. He'd become an advocate for military dogs, for veterans, for the importance of the human-animal bond. And Max had become a symbol of loyalty, a symbol of courage, a symbol of the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his dog. On a quiet evening, James and Max sat together on the porch of their ranch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red and purple. The air was cool and fresh, and James had his hand resting on Max's neck, just like he had 1,000 times before. "We did it, buddy," James whispered. "We survived. We healed. We helped others. We made a difference." Max's tail thumped against the porch, a slow, gentle sound. The dog was content. The dog was at peace. The dog was home. And James understood something in that moment. He understood that the explosion in that warehouse, as traumatic as it had been, had led to something greater. It had led to the exposure of corruption. It had led to the rescue of 50 other military dogs. It had led to the change of military policy. It had led to the inspiration of thousands of people around the world. And it had all happened because of one simple thing: a soldier who refused to leave his dog behind. A soldier who understood that some bonds are stronger than any force in the universe. A soldier who understood that loyalty, true loyalty, is worth fighting for. This is the story of Captain James Mitchell and military dog Max. This is the story of a bond that transcended species, that transcended training, that transcended everything. This is the story of two beings who faced death together and chose to trust each other completely. And it's a story that reminds us of something fundamental about ourselves. It reminds us that loyalty matters. It reminds us that love matters. It reminds us that the bonds we form with others, whether human or animal, are sacred. They are worth protecting. They are worth fighting for. Max passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 years after this documentary was made. He was 14 years old, which is a long life for a German Shepherd. But in those extra years that James fought for, Max got to experience something that many military dogs never get to experience: peace, love, a home, a family. And James continues his work today, rescuing military dogs, telling their stories, advocating for their rights. Because he understands something that most people don't understand. These dogs are heroes. They've served their country. They've risked their lives. They deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. If you've been moved by this story, if you've been inspired by the bond between James and Max, please consider supporting organizations that help military dogs. Please consider adopting a rescue dog. Please consider recognizing the incredible sacrifice that these animals make for our country. Because in the end, this is a story about love. This is a story about loyalty. This is a story about the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his dog. And that's a story that deserves to be told. That's a story that deserves to be remembered. That's a story that deserves to inspire us all to be better, to love deeper, to fight harder for the things that matter. Thank you for watching. And if you've been moved by this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. Because this is a story that the world needs to hear.